Welcome back to a new episode of the Computational Antitrust podcast. My name is Thibault Schrepel. I am a faculty affiliate at Stanford University Codex Center, an associate professor of law at the VU Amsterdam, and the creator of the Computational Antitrust project, which explores how legal informatics can benefit antitrust law. The project brings together over 65 competition agencies and about 50 academics on the advisory board. Every month or so, we publish an academic article on the subject of computational antitrust. You can find all of these publications at computationalantitrust.com.
I am Teodora Groza. I am a PhD student in competition law at Sciences Po, a research fellow on a project on AI governance co-hosted by Sciences Po and Codex, and the editor-in-chief of the Stanford Computational Antitrust Journal.
Today, we are absolutely delighted to welcome Martijn Snoep on the podcast. Martijn is the chairman of the ACM, the Netherlands Authority of Consumers and Markets.
In today's discussion, we cover a broad range of topics, ranging from sustainability, the progress the ACM has made with computational tools over the past 7 years, but also some interesting thoughts about art, black boxes, and algorithms. I hope you enjoy the conversation and that you stay tuned to our future podcasts.
Martijn, thank you so very much for coming on the podcast. Funnily enough, you very kindly accepted to guest lecture in one of my courses just last week. So it feels like we are seeing each other almost on a daily basis. I hope it's not too much, but it's good to see you. So what we've done is that we have divided the conversation in two different parts. First, we want to talk about computational antitrust in general and your take at the ACM. And then we want to move to the more legal side of it, because it comes with many legal questions and challenges that sometimes are unaddressed or addressed, but in a bit of an obscure way. For now, tackling the broad perspective, I guess the first question I have for you is this. You joined the ACM in 2018, 2 months after I arrived in the Netherlands, by the way, so I'm not sure if there is a causality here. So can you give us an overview of how computational antitrust has evolved within the agency since then?
Yeah. So maybe to give an answer both from an kind of institutional point of view and what we actually do in practice. I think from an institutional point of view, when I started, there were already mainly econometricians working at the agency who were working with algorithms and modeling, and who were doing kind of more experimental stuff, reviewing tender databases, and maybe come back to that later, to see if for screening purposes, to see if there is any behavior that indicates cartel-like behavior, collusion. So it's not that there was nothing when I arrived, but I think one of the priorities for me, for the board of which I'm a part, we are a collegial board, so we always do this with the three of us, for us was to bring this up to a higher standard. And basically we had a three-prong approach in random order. We created a central unit, which is in our case called the Task Force Data and Algorithms, with dedicated people, data scientists, econometricians, and people with, strong data knowledge, but also experience in how to analyze data and how to make it accessible in graphs and in products that other people can use. So that unit has now grown to about 30 people, and that functions as a central unit for the entire ACM. And so, as you know, we are not only a competition agency, but we're also a consumer protection agency, telecoms authority, energy regulator. So this unit caters to all these different groups. And I think that really jumped our capabilities, that accelerated our capabilities in all aspects. So this was one part, the institutional part. And then second, on the content part, that we very much encouraged our different groups in the agency to think about data, to think about collection of data, to think about the data that we have and the data that we can get, and how we can deploy that in our analyses of, in all the different fields. And that, I think that worked. That is still work in progress. We're, by far not where we want to be, and that's continuously developing. And there we do some, which are, in my opinion, really great stuff in that. And then thirdly, we thought about how are we going to use that in practice. So this is kind of look at the data, analyze the data, think about the data. But then, of course, how do you use that in our regular day-to-day basis? And then we asked the teams to focus on kind of basically two different things: monitoring, but for enforcement, but also monitoring for transparency of the market. So, for example, we monitor energy prices, and we do that with computational methods and have monthly reports to the public on energy prices. And then second, we use computational methods in, for example, market definition, in market analysis, and in pricing. And that's kind of the second leg. And then the third leg is how can we use it ourselves? New computational methods, web crawling, data analyses that we use as evidence or the beginning of evidence for our enforcement actions. So that is basically how it developed since I started in 2018. But I don't want to take all the credit for it. I mean, it's done by the people, of course, at the agency. And then second, and they have a strong lead in it. And secondly, it was already in the making before I arrived.
Yeah, so you've mentioned three legs. We've been pushing the message that humans have a role, an important role to play, even in computational antitrust. Now, if you have three legs instead of two, it makes you maybe more of a humanoid of something, augmented. But moving on to the present days, you've mentioned the use of those computational tools in market defs and monitoring of prices. So it seems that it is very widespread within the agency. Yeah. Do you have any specific example in mind where that technical expertise made a significant contributions, not just a tiny one, but something very important in one of your recent decisions?
Now, for example, in market definitions, so we revised our market definitions for car dealer concentrations. We changed our market definition or refined our market definition for supermarkets, all based on data processing, huge amounts of data that we received from the parties, where we could, as a result of that, be more specific on our market definition and see how competition works. So, that's a great example. I think that we also, in our consumer protection work, we use web crawlers for detection of unfair conditions in general contracts. So we use web crawlers to detect sudden price trade. Mostly travel agents use different pricing mechanisms. And as a result of that, consumers do not always can book a travel with the travel agents for the price that's being advertised. And that is something that we follow closely with web crawlers. And then finally, we have an algorithm that helps us detect price signaling by companies through public media. So we constantly monitor the market to say that when companies use certain price announcements, to see if that is particularly in concentrated markets, to see whether that is used as a way to prohibit illegal price signaling.
Yeah, so you really have the means to be proactive in a world where reactive methods are on the decline. Let me ask maybe a question. Is it true that we shouldn't then book flights and trains on a Saturday night because it tends to be more expensive than on Monday morning? Are you aware of any evidence or?
No, well, so what we did is what you see is in often cases that travel agents try to lure you into their systems with very low prices, and it's impossible then to book a travel for that price. And that is not allowed. I mean, the price with which you advertise should be able to be booked but usually what most people do is say, yeah, I don't want to leave on a Wednesday. I want to leave on a Saturday, and then the price go up. That is legal, but it should be possible to book a travel for the price that is being advertised, and that we can check. And then second, your question leads to kind of a follow-up of something that we are now working on. Is it so far we were very much focused, so far we were very much focused on the detection, but now we're also starting to use computational methods to better understand the computational methods that the companies that we investigate use. So for a still confidential investigation, we are now investigating the pricing algorithm of a big marketplace and to see how they influence with their algorithm third parties and the pricing of third parties. And the second thing that we will start to look at this year is how does, if I might say, the computational pricing by companies actually work. So we see two different strands. Dynamic pricing is becoming more and more popular. It used to be that dynamic pricing was something that particularly the airlines did, but we now see it in concert tickets and in all other areas. And we want to understand how the algorithms behind dynamic pricing actually work and whether that is done in a fair way from a consumer protection point of view. And then the second element is that what we see is that the personalized pricing becomes more and more sophisticated, and we want to better understand the algorithms behind personalized pricing, because what we see is that some companies are being able to get, have more sophisticated means to get to the willingness to pay of consumers. And as a result of that, the entire consumer or the consumer surplus is being shifted to the producer surplus. Well, that has all sorts of welfare consequences. I'm not saying that that is illegal per se at the moment, but it is a development in the market that will have an economic impact, not only for consumers who will become poorer because they can buy less with the same amount of money, but also for opportunities for other companies to basically get part of the consumer surplus, and that the effects that will have on business dynamics.
So you just mentioned that you are currently dedicated resources to understanding how companies themselves deploy computational tools. I was wondering if you think there's a significant gap between the tools you have and the tools these companies have, and also the law firms they work with, maybe.
Yeah, it varies. So let's start with the easiest one. I think the law firms the law firms that we usually encounter do not have computational tools themselves. I think we are ahead of the law firms. Like what the law firms obviously do, I know that because I was a private practitioner in a big law firm myself, is they hire outside consultants. So they are not going to build that capacity internally, but for the more complicated stuff, they will hire outside consultants, and they are ahead of us. And I think that's what for the agency we simply cannot afford hiring outside consultancies. So we need to build that capacity inside, and that is an arms race where we will probably always be a little behind. But on the other hand, we have our statutory tools, and we can require information. We can compel companies to cooperate with us. We can compel third parties to provide us information, including the consultants. So I think there will always be some asymmetry, but I'm not too worried about that.
So you were saying that you are a step ahead as compared to the law firms. Does it make it easier for you to hire top talent?
Actually, I was always singing the song of what many people in public service do is that, it's difficult to get top talent and we'll always lose their raise. But actually, that's not the case. If I'm honest, we don't have a big problem finding the right people in this space. And because what we see is that there are a lot of young people that are for various reasons happy to work for the government. We provide them a very exciting environment that they have a lot of autonomy in a basically in a setting that is organized as a consultancy. So it's there is a senior partner, what we call our chief data officer, who heads the task force for data and algorithms, and he is very knowledgeable. He's I don't know exactly his age, but he is in his 50s. So he is kind of the figurehead for this group, and that attracts young people that want to learn, and they can do that in a non-commercial environment. And the young people I talk to is, of course, I often ask, why did you come to work for us? Because the salaries are okay, but it is by far not as much as you can make in the private sector. And they often said, sometimes they started in the private sector, but they didn't like the commercial pressure and also the meaning of the work. I mean, here, what you do in this agency is you really work for the people. We really try to make the Dutch economy and the Dutch market, but also the lives of Dutch citizens better. And I'm extremely happy that there are sufficient people that say, I'd rather do that than to make a couple of tech bros in the US a bit richer than they already are. And I'm not, it's fine to do that. So I'm not saying that everyone should do that, but we have enough people who choose to do something else with their lives. And I'm glad that we can provide the working environment for them to do that.
We often hear about ways to divide generations with labels, Gen Z, the millennials, the boomers, and so on and so forth. And it seems, and I'm not sure if it's substantiated, but that the willingness of all of those generations to work for the public sector and have meaning in their work is not evenly distributed. You say that you are not struggling to hire those people. Are you hiring those people from TU Delft and Eindhoven, meaning the top technical universities in the Netherlands, or are you also hiring from the US and elsewhere in Europe?
No, and that is, I think, a handicap for this organization, and people need to be able to speak Dutch. So that is a requirement. We don't care where they went to school, but they need to speak Dutch, and that is a requirement that limits our choice. It is also something that we are now trying to change, because what we see is, fortunately, in the Netherlands, there are a lot of non-Dutch students, and more of them want to stay in the Netherlands. And during the course of their studies, they've mastered the Dutch language a bit more. And it's really not necessary to speak the language fluently and write it fluently, but you need to have some basic understanding of Dutch, and you need to be able to follow a conversation in a group. And that is sufficient. So with that requirement, we are already able to get some non-native Dutch speakers to work for us. And we're also willing to help those people to further improve their language skills. So I think the recruitment of non-Dutch talent is ultimately very important for the agency, and we will continue to do that.
All right, good. So that's a good place for us to move to part 2, because we end on a positive note. And here we want to talk about the legal issues surrounding all of what we've been discussing so far. To get it started, I believe you may have a story that you shared in the classroom last week, which I found to be absolutely fascinating, as to how your agency is using Gen AI. So if you can share that with us, I think this would be wonderful.
Yeah, so it is serious and a bit of a joke. So it's not, I don't want to give the impression that is all we do.
But we'll talk about the rest in
But one thing that happened is that in a big case in the Netherlands, a party that was opposing one of our decisions, the company, filed a brief with the court really at the latest moment. And this was something like, 200 pages, 180 pages. Impossible for, a couple of days before the hearing to really understand that brief and to respond to it. So what we did, and the people at the legal service came up with the idea, so that I don't take any credit for it. It was their idea. And I thought it was great. They did a Gen AI summary of the brief, submitted it to the court, and said, this is crazy. The parties submitted this way too late in the process. They could have done it earlier. So there was really it was not necessary to do it in advance. We asked Gen AI to make a copy of it, a summary of it, and we'll only respond to the summary. And the court thought it was a great idea. They laughed. They were also annoyed by the fact that this was submitted this late. But this is this was kind of half jokingly the way we used it. But it is a nice bridge how we are using Gen AI in various ways, including making summaries of briefs, decisions, all kinds of things. So, and that brings me, maybe it's just a bridge between the things that we talked in the first part and the second part, is that our role as a board in this transformation is very much leading by example. So what we believe as a board is that we need to encourage the use of all kinds of tools. We need to remove the idea that this is extremely risky. And what is interesting is, so I often talk with different groups at the agency, and I was at a particular group a couple of weeks ago, and I said to the group, well, are you using Gen AI? different tools. And it was not a clear answer. So I said, well, I'm using it all the time, and for my blogs, and I do a LinkedIn post, and if I do change something, or I want to make a summary of a huge document, and they looked at me like, "Is he serious?" And I said, "Yes, of course we can do it. With certain precautions, you can just simply use it." And then someone said, "Well, actually, I use it too." And then someone else said, "Well, I use it too for this and this and this." And these were direct colleagues from each other. And that led me to see that there is a sort of AI shame. And I addressed that in front of the entire agency. We have monthly meetings, like catch-up meetings, what's going on. And I told the agency, we need to overcome this AI shame. And, if you're not using AI, it's like, you're not using computers. Well, it's ridiculous. It's a new tool that we don't know exactly what we'll do with it. But if you don't start using it now, you'll be behind forever. So you have to get on the train. And I think that is the role of leadership in an agency is, we cannot invent and decide and tell people how to use it, but our role as leaders in the agency is to remove any barrier for other people to use it.
And now we want to talk, of course, about all the challenges around the use of AI in others. Let me just mention that maybe on the other end of the spectrum, if you consider AI shame on the left, then I may be totally on the right. I realized yesterday that very often when I travel and I commute to the law school by bike, I talk to ChatGPT and ask all sorts of questions. And I thought, that's so Dutch of me. I probably deserve the Dutch citizenship for that. But anyway, back to you, Teodora, for some more serious, although, that's a very serious topic, but legal questions.
Actually, I have a quick follow-up on that. Do you think the AI shame comes from the fact that these tools come from private companies and there's a bit of an adversarial presumption that these tools cannot be used by the agency since it's supposed to protect the public interest?
No, I think the shame comes from the fact that professionals have the feeling that they cheat when they use AI tools. It's like, well, we used to read 400 pages and then make a summary, and that was the real work. And now we cheat by letting a machine do that. So it's they see the convenience, they see how it works. They are a bit worried about whether it's a good summary, and so there are the normal scares, and some are totally legitimate, and others are less legitimate. But I think that the shame comes from it almost feels like cheating on a test. That is a development professionals have to go through. I'm sure in a couple of years that's gone. But we need to address that in a group of professionals that take pride in what they do and take pride in their skills. You have to confront that and discuss with the professionals that it should be, if you're not using it, it is unprofessional.
So the adversarial relationship is not private versus public, but humans versus machines, right? As if the machine is stealing something from the human's work.
Yes, yeah, and so it's not a Luddite kind of thing. Yeah? So as we are against machines, but it is, I used to be people, here, apart from the data scientists, but even the economists, many of the economists take huge pride in writing, in how they construct sentences and how they shape a good argument in words. And big part of that work is going to be done by computers. So I think our professionals need to think about what's for the humans and what's for the computers, and that there will be a rebalancing of what the computer does and the humans do. I'm a great lover of art, and in the past, before ready-made paint was made available in tubes, this was second half of the 19th century, painters would make their own pigments, make their own paint with pigments. And this was an essential part of the craft of a painter, making your own paint. And when these ready-made tubes came out, lots of painters kind of said, but that's not real, that is not really painting anymore. If you do not make your own colors and you do not how to make your own paint, then you cannot be a painter. And of course, now, no one, I think hardly any painter makes his own paint. Everyone buys ready-made paint. So that took I don't know how many years, but a number of years. And I think we'll see the same development now with people who write, is that we have to develop a different relationship with how they write. And to draw on the parallel with painters, I think what I like is that it also opened up new opportunities. Painters who use ready-made paint out of tubes can paint outside. Before that, painters could not paint outside because you had to carry so much stuff with you. So even beautiful landscapes that you see that are old before the time of ready-made paint are made in studios. And it was only after the invention of ready-made paint in tubes that actually painters could paint plein air, outside in nature. So it also developed a totally new type of painting and a new capturing of the light. So I see, if you draw the parallel to where we are now, is that the way we write and how we write is going to fundamentally change as a result of Gen AI. And I don't know how, so I'm not a futurologist, but I know that we are at the beginning or beyond the beginning of something that is going to change our work fundamentally.
Yeah, as academics, we also struggle with how to reimagine our writing styles in the age of ChatGPT, so we are very familiar with this challenge. But now, to go back to the law, as we promised a few seconds ago, there's this report on Regulation 1/2003, where the Commission said that agencies struggle to access information or to receive it in a timely manner, which hurts their capacities to engage in proactive investigations. Do you encounter this issue?
Yeah.
And so, do you think computational tools could help you in that respect? And I know you talked a lot in the first part about web crawlers and how you get data on various industries. So maybe it's time to sort of tie that knot a bit closer.
No, so we see there are we faced two challenges. One challenge is that we try to get data from public databases that were constructed for different purposes. For example, we have a database that has all the public tenders for construction work, say in the Netherlands. And we would really like to get our hands on that data, but it was collected for a different purpose, namely kind of to follow government spending. That makes it hard to share with us, and the public authority responsible for maintaining this database do not want to share this with us, not because they do not like us or do not trust us, but they are afraid that if the market players know that this data is going to be shared with us, that they will not get the data any longer. So this is a challenge, and we see this in other aspects as well. So access to public databases, not in the sense of open databases, but public databases in the sense of collected by the government. And then the second issue that we're facing is that, which I also understand, is that companies, are reluctant to give us a lot of data. So they try to restrict us, limit us, make it difficult for us. So that requires constant negotiation and a bit of arm wringing with the companies so that we get the data on time. And fortunately, again, that we have the help of the data scientists who also speak to the data scientists on the other side. And I think that helps in the conversation. If you have that conversation between two lawyers, or that, then it's, they don't speak, a lot get lost in translation. And what we try to do is to get that conversation at the data scientist level so that they understand what is, because we don't need more data than we need for the analysis that we make. But sometimes we cannot articulate well enough exactly what data we need and, what data is available. So that conversation ideally takes place at the data scientist level, and that works better.
Yeah. Funny enough, I was told that data scientists and computer scientists are like economists in a sense that if you put two in a room, you are almost guaranteed to get two different kind of opinions, right? So I would love to be in a room and see if yours and the data scientists of the company necessarily will disagree even on the kind of data they need to collect. Is that the experience you have, or do you find more consensus on?
I find more consensus. Yeah, more consensus than controversy. Of course, because they speak each other's language. It's the same with lawyers and economists, is that, if there's a really difficult, complicated legal argument, it's better to talk to a lawyer so you can see what the different positions are and you speak according to the same logic. That's also for economists and that's also for data scientists. So the way we see it in our agency, this is just it's like a group of economists or a group of lawyers. It's a profession, professionals like to talk or can easily talk to people from the same profession.
Yeah. And a lot of what we've been trying is to actually bring that language to the law and the legal language to computer scientists. And it's also what we do in the classroom.
Yeah, and that is great, and it is super important, and it is similar, and I think it's to the development that we saw when I started in practice in the early 90s is with economists. Exactly. So lawyers do not need to become economists.
Exactly.
They need to understand the economists to be able to talk to the economists. And the economists need to understand a little bit about the legal structure and the law, because otherwise they can never function as a good economist, either as a consultant or in-house. And now the same development with data scientists.
Yeah. The one difference that I see in the classroom is that when I used to teach in the law and econ program, and when came the time for econometrics, the legal students will complain, telling me I didn't come to law school to learn about math and econometrics and so on and so forth. Although for competition purposes, it may be good to have a little bit of understanding of what it does and what you can achieve. When it comes to computer science, I see the exact opposite. When it comes for the times for me to teach them the basic of computational thinking, how to code, they are very excited. So I think we're going to bridge the gap between those two languages faster than what we've been doing it with law and econ.
That's good. That's very good news. I hope it also has to do with the way we look at the law, because I was always allergic to lawyers saying I didn't come to law school to do equations or statistics. It's ridiculous. Law is a part of the social sciences. You need to have a basic understanding of other social sciences in order to be a good lawyer. It's not an isolated profession.
So just to go back to the question I asked earlier, I see that a trick you use to get data when you cannot access it normally is to have data scientists talk to one another. I was wondering, are there any other tricks that you can pull? And I'm asking this question because I was at a conference last year where someone from the CMA said that the investigation they opened into OpenAI Microsoft was more of a way to get more data and not necessarily a pure merger control investigation. Are there any legal tools you can leverage when the data you can access to is not enough?
No, we are strict in the sense if we do a merger control investigation, we cannot ask for data that we cannot use for merger control, but we want to do for other purposes. But what we do have, which is a very interesting tool, is we can always conduct a market study. Conducting market studies is we have a general competency in our laws to conduct any market study, and companies are required to cooperate with a market investigation. So if we ask them for information, they have to provide that information. Of course, there's a proportionality test, but given that the market investigation is so wide, then they also have an obligation to provide that amount of data. One thing that I must admit I didn't realize until last year is that processing data also costs money. And so we are collecting so much data lately that our bill is increasing. So from our side, we have to rethink also from a cost perspective, how much data we need, how much we're going to process. So this is a new element, and it's something that we're going to further develop this year to see how we can do this in a cost-efficient manner. I only became aware with looking at the financials for the previous year that our costs have increased substantially, and that we need to probably be more efficient processing data.
And it begs interesting questions. Are you storing the data and processing the data with your own servers? Are you relying on cloud? If so, big tech companies? Centralized ones? Right.
Yeah, no, so we are in the midst of a transition where we work partially with a government cloud and partially with our own servers, but that's ultimately that is a dead-end street. And then the government is rethinking its government cloud and what to do with that. So that it's how this is going to play out, we don't know. We are really in a transition, and hopefully in 2 years we have this in order. But it is now a higher priority than before.
Yeah. So let's assume that you figure it out, you do it in a cost-effective manner, you collect the data, you have all you need, you're ready to start the investigation. Now, you are a proponent of giving sustainability more weight in competition law. If you still want to rely on computational tools, the question then becomes, what proxies are you using to quantify harm or sustainability? How do you integrate that into analysis that can be computed, which means quantified? Do you have already some thought on that?
The honest answer is no. So we have not used computational tools in our sustainability cases so far. I think it's what is relatively easy, or it could be relatively easy, is measuring price effects and modeling price effects as a result of an agreement. I think that's basically straightforward. What we also do in merger modeling, the negative effect of a certain corporation, that is doable. And then quantifying the positive effects, the sustainability benefits. We have a model for that, just a standard model, particularly when it comes to CO2 reduction. But how to use computational for that, we haven't figured out. And there was also no necessity to do it.
Yeah. And it's going to be a big challenge. We face the very same question when it comes to innovation. It is sometimes very hard to quantify. It's not like a price. And so actually, Teodora and I have a working paper out there entitled Computing Innovation Competition, in which we ask, which proxies can you use? Are we ready for that? But back to you, Teodora.
I just want to push you a bit further on how we quantify the non-quantifiable. Because when we have humans taking decisions, nobody expects them to reverse engineer how much weight they give to different factors in quantifiable terms. You're not supposed to say, this amount is for 30%, this was 15, this was 60, and whatnot. But when it comes to algorithms, there's this idea that they're black boxes, and unless we can reverse engineer very precisely how they reached a certain decision, they're not supposed to be used in law enforcement. So do you think that in this sense, computational tools are held to a harsher standard than human decision makers because they're expected to be able to reverse engineer to the very granular details their decisions, whereas humans are really not?
Yes, I think that's true. They're probably put to a higher standard. And that is ultimately, I think, probably more psychological or sociological point of view, is that people tend to trust humans more than machines without that being justified. So, I see the point, and it's also something that we take into account. We would never take a decision based on just computational analysis. There's also, if you take, for example, which is, I think, a good point. It's not exactly the same, but it's getting there close. So in many complicated mergers, we do merger modeling. We build a price effect model to see based on data. So it's not a hypothetical data, but it's really based on real life data, pricing data from the companies. And then we make a prediction on what the price effects of the merger are. But that is never enough to block a merger or to approve a merger. So we always, next to that, look at internal documents. So with all its good things and flaws, we look at interviews and customer complaints and competitor complaints and take everything together. In a way, I think that coming back to what we said earlier, that about what is the role of what is our new role as professionals, and I think it also has to do with those types of judgment, sort of human judgment of, and I don't know exactly, because I don't know exactly how it works for myself either. I'm also a judge, but the judgment is important, but also the process of how it is delivered. And if as a judge, if I have people in front of me who are in a fight, I hope that I do a better job than a machine. Even if the machine would do it, has a higher chance of giving the correct legal answer. It's the fact that we listen to people, that they can say something, that we ask judges, that we ask them questions, that they have the feeling that they're being heard. So indeed, the process of justice is as important as the outcome.
And our relationship to technology will certainly change, as we discussed already. It might be absolutely crazy to board on a plane, let's say 50 years from now, with a human pilot.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's a possibility. Now, on merger simulations, we actually published a paper quite a couple years ago now by Oliver Budinsky and Victoria Noskova on the use of AI in merger simulations. So it seems to be a very topical issue. One final question. When it comes to the trade-offs that as an agency you have to address, and here again, going back to sustainability, you do not always have a trade-off in terms of sustainability versus price, but it might be that in specific situations you have that, right? How transparent are you when it comes to addressing those trade-offs in your decisions? And I'm asking because, of course, your willingness to be more or less transparent will impact your ability, as we just discussed, to use computational tools.
The 100% transparent, because that is extremely important for our legitimacy. We have great powers, and at least as what we believe with when it comes to sustainability, but also to innovation, maybe more powers than orthodox thinkers think that we have. So I am not worried about making trade-offs between sustainability and price, and also between price and innovation, between short-term prices and long-term prices and quantity, as long as we can be fully transparent about it. And because then it is justified. Of course, we need the democratic legitimacy to do this. So we need to have a law that allows us to make this trade-off. And I believe the current laws allow us to do that. The precondition is that we are totally transparent about it, and that it is also replicable, so that other parties can check what we did and replicate the computational analysis that we made, and can challenge it in court and do whatever they want to do with it. And that's a fundamental principle for our decisions.
Yeah, and a fundamental challenge, because as we just covered, if you push for 100% transparency, it may actually limit your ability to use tools where it will be hard to compute specific elements, right? Because then you will need to be able to quantify them in a very specific way. Okay, we actually asked, this is a bonus question, Mahmoud Momtaz, the chairman of the Egyptian Competition Agency, a final question that, according to him, was quite challenging. And I thought it would be fair to ask you the very same question. What is the one thing that you wish people will be aware of when it comes to the Dutch Competition Agency?
The one thing that I'm proud of and that I continuously push is that we are a very open, transparent agency. So open in the sense we have no preconditioned views. We are impartial. We are open to different arguments. We are not against big tech, but we're also not pro-big tech. We are not against big companies, but we are not necessarily think only big companies can save the world. So I think that open-mindedness is both to parties, but also to the law. Is that, it's not a fixed thing what it is, but I hope the one thing that people will see in and will remember of how we handle things is our openness to parties and arguments.
Are you aware that as a foreigner, I see that as a cultural trait of the Dutch culture, the openness? Is that the reason why you are trying to push openness, to make it the identity of the agency, or is it just something that emerged?
I think it's something that emerged, but it's also that resonates with me very much as a professional. So I think it's also as a human being, by the way. So, and I think that's the best way how to approach difficult, because we are making difficult decisions and we have to make judgment calls. But the best way to do that is in an open and transparent way. And then people, if they don't agree, fully understand. I don't blame them for that. And fortunately, we have a court system, and they have 2 instances where they can try it again. And we are pretty relaxed in court. And if the courts say, well, we should have done it differently, okay. That's not saying that they're always right, but it's a court decision, and we play by the rules. And if the court says that you should do it this way, we do it that way.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think it's a good place for us to end the conversation. Thank you so very much. Thank you for everything you're doing at the ACM and for all of your work. And to everyone out there, take care of yourself. And if you can, someone else too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.